Thanks for listening to Creative Outcomes. I'm Jimmy Balo from Upsourced. We're a CFO and accounting firm focused on helping creative agencies. I'm looking forward to our chat today with Logan Lyles. He's from the evangelism and content marketing team at teamwork.com. He's also the host of the Agency Life podcast. Thanks so much for taking the time to join me today. Let's jump right into it. I think the first question that I had really just kind of wanted to touch on your background working in-house at an agency at Sweetfish. One of the questions that I had was just right around sort of like your role and right around like founder-led growth and your role as sort of somebody that was coming into an agency. And one of the things that we see a lot is, hey, agencies that are typically between $1 million and $10 million in revenue, a lot of their growth is being generated from the founder. And one of the things that I think you're in a really unique position to kind of speak on was like, hey, as somebody that was coming into the organization that was sort of in charge of leading growth and business development, but wasn't the founder. How was that perspective? And like, what was that like kind of stepping into that role? A lot of times we have agencies that say like, hey, I'm the founder, and would be really hard for me to not wear that business development hat and pass that off to somebody else.
Mhm. Yeah, it is definitely a common situation. Thankfully for me, I had a leg up. I was taking over sales from an agency founder who was like, "Yes, here, please take it." I remember asking James Carberry is the founder of Sweetfish. Give him a shout out here. I asked him like, "Hey, have you recorded any of your sales calls so I can kind of understand what's the existing sales process? How do you like to do things?" And at one point, he was like, "I've listened to a few of these. Like, I don't want you listening to them. Just like come in and do it better." Because he was very much a people person, great talker, great trust builder, led with authenticity, spoke strategically, like did all of the intangible things right when it comes to sales. But he was like, I hate the process. Like, I don't want to do that. I need to bring someone in. And I was coming from 10 years of local, regional B2B tech sales. And so I had a leg up in that I had a founder who was like willing, ready, able, excited to hand off the reins of sales. And so sometimes I think agency founders hesitate and they're like, I'll give this, but I can't really trust it. Right. Today I host the Agency Life podcast. And I remember Lee McKnight Jr., who was a guest talking about kind of the mistakes you can make in bringing on a business development director or a new sales hire. And there are lots of mistakes there. So I was in a good position. And I remember James asking me this question. He's like, well, if you come on and you're running sales and you're kind of running it end to end from prospecting to close, full cycle sales rep, if you will, for the agency. And he asked me, he's like, are you cool if part of this role, a part of your job description is creating content on LinkedIn? And I was like, heck yeah. You're telling me that gets to be part of my job? And so it started with that willing handover. And two, it started with business development, not as usual. We executed a strategy called content based networking that allowed me to do outbound in a non outbound way. And then on top of that, I started creating content on LinkedIn that generated new opportunities. Eventually, we scaled that into a full evangelism program that involved the founder, myself, and other members of the team. And we can talk about kind of best practices and what people can learn from that. But that was kind of the situation for me for context.
No, I love that, and I think that stepping into that role, like I think one of the things that we see a lot is like owners feel like they have to have everything dialed, where it's like, hey, I have to have like a perfectly sort of locked in CRM that's completely set up, and I need to make sure that I have a ton of content marketing, just in terms of that sales engine and having it already built. And I think that one of the things that we always say is just like, hey, it's okay if you don't have all of that dialed. You can sort of add pieces over time. But the biggest thing is really just trying to kind of make sure that your sort of consistency is key, where whether it's making sure that you have your content marketing on an ongoing basis, or whether it may be outbound or a combination of both, but just staying with it. It's not, it can't be one of those things that you do for 3 months, you fill the pipeline up, and then you don't touch it again. If you're able to just continue as you are busy, continue to maintain it, that's where you see the results, and you don't really see those peaks and valleys. So I love that. I guess one of the questions that I had, just kind of around that, just in terms of like LinkedIn, is like one of the strategies that I've heard you speak on, and one of the things that you've sort of have talked about previously. But for any agency, or any service based business, like the people are the product. And one of the things that we've had the experience of talking to, and one of the things that we've learned from Kuba and the team over at Zen Pilot was basically just kind of like switching the mindset of like rather than just posting on like the company LinkedIn page, having like the people that are a part of your team sort of like post on their pages and and have it really come from them as an individual as opposed to coming from like the org as a whole. So would love just kind of your perspective on that, and just kind of walking the audience kind of through that philosophy.
Yeah, I think it has to do with especially this big shift in the market that I think is even more paramount today and even more obvious today in 2024 than it was in 2018 when we were really going all in on this strategy, the evangelism program that I was a part of at Sweetfish, which essentially you summed it up perfectly. We were putting out content on LinkedIn through about 5 members of our executive team and then other members of the team, and we weren't even really putting out much content on our LinkedIn company page. Like I had prospects come to us and they're like, you guys don't have any followers on your LinkedIn page. I was like, look at James's page with 20,000 followers. Look at my profile with 10,000. Look at Dan Sanchez, our director of audience growth at the time. He's got 12,000, this and that. I was like, that's fine with me. Cause I literally had prospects coming in and they're like, I'm obsessed with Dan's content. And I was like, this is going to be a good sales call. Right. And so I think it worked well then. But I think it's even more important now. The shift I was alluding to that I've heard people like Jared Fuller speak to is that there's this shift happening from the how economy to the who economy. Digital marketing really started, content took off, content is king, right? And it became about who can provide the answer to the how question your clients are asking. How do I get started with content marketing? How do I hire a marketing agency? How do I set up a new website and start blogging, all that sort of stuff? Now, people know that whether it's Google or YouTube or even TikTok, they can ask those how questions and get an answer. The question is, what content can I trust? So now they're asking the question of, who do I know who can solve this problem? Who comes to mind? What name, what face, what person in my network, whether I know them one to one or I've seen their face on LinkedIn, which is going to tie into what we're talking about here. Who do I know that I can trust to give me the answer about the how? So I think that shift from how to who is why this is really so important. And then essentially what we did is we were putting out a lot of content through individual personal profiles and really kind of leaving the company page, as it was, maybe doing some things to kind of keep the lights on and that sort of stuff. But we were really focused in on how do we create as much valuable content so that people are seeing consistently, not only Sweetfish, but they're seeing James and Logan and Dan and Bill and other members of the leadership team. And it really worked. And that prospect's quote of "I'm obsessed with Dan's content" really kind of summed it up.
I love it. No, that definitely like we've especially over the last few months have kind of shifted more to that approach just internally as our team. Just because we have so many like subject matter experts and we have so many people on our side that want to kind of share what they're talking about with clients and just kind of on a daily basis and share that with their audience. And we have definitely seen like some traction there. And I think that that is a really smart approach, particularly with any service-based business.
I love that you said that. I love that you guys are doing that. And, just as someone who's collaborated with you guys on content, we had Ryan Watson from your team on our Agency Life podcast. And I saw the post that you guys did. You kind of staggered him out about his episode on our podcast. And I can tell you from our analytics and our podcast hosts, we saw more downloads because people were talking about that. We saw more views on the YouTube video where Ryan was speaking. So you guys are getting his thought leadership out there by this strategy. It reminds me of Pete Caputa, the CEO over at DataBox. He said something the other day when he was a guest on Agency Life. And he said, I think the future of agency marketing is getting the practitioners out there on podcasts, on social. And the thing I would encourage any agency founder or service-based business leader who's listening to this is you actually have an advantage over maybe a bigger software company. Like today, I'm in the marketing team at teamwork.com. We've got 350 plus employees, 30-person marketing team or so. So we have resources that a small agency doesn't have. But what do you have as a service-based business? You've got a tighter feedback loop from conversations with customers and prospects and the strategy and the questions they're asking and those things that are coming from those consultative calls that can generate the exact sort of content that's going to position you as a thought leader on LinkedIn to those clients that are still prospective clients. And at a larger software company, like the front lines, the account managers, the CSMs, those folks are having the real conversations, right? All of those things like flowing back into the marketing team and impacting what we're doing on social. It's a longer feedback loop. You've got a really tight one that you can take advantage of if you can efficiently create a system for creating the content for LinkedIn and distributing it through these personal profiles.
I love it. How are you? I mean, that sort of um, sparked just another question, and sorry if we kind of go down this rabbit hole, but like, how are you guys on the marketing team getting that feedback loop for such a large organization? Just because like one of the things that we've shifted to, and this has been a kind of a change over the last few months, is that we have started recording a lot of our sales calls. So that like, hey, when we do hand off from sales to the service team, they already understand sort of some of the pain points that a potential new client has experienced and has expressed. So it's not just coming from me in our team, but it's actually you're hearing it directly from the client, and I think that's been really helpful. And then on the other, like the flip side, sort of we've also started recording some of our like client calls, which has been really great. So that from the sales and the business development side of things, we've been able to kind of hear, hey, how have things been going? What's the client experience like a year, 2 years into the engagement, and how has that been? And how can we make sure that some of the new insights and some of the new frameworks that our team has been developing is getting carried back to the sales process so that we're able to kind of like talk about what sort of we're seeing just from boots on the ground. But how is that working from the software company?
Yeah, so I'll kind of speak to that, and I've got two things I want to share, and I think I can share how that what we're doing there you could replicate in a service-based business, and also how we're doing it at teamwork.com. So one of the first thing I wanted to talk about is call recording. I love that you guys are doing that. It's one of the first things I implemented when I took over business development at Sweetfish was we need call recording software for the exact reasons that you just talked about. Now that software has gotten even more sophisticated. There's lower cost options out there, even if you can't afford like a Gong call recording software or revenue intelligence platform, I think is their category now. But we use a call recording software here at teamwork.com. And oftentimes that's where we get these great snippets. We've got a chat channel internally where people are posting testimonials and nice comments and that sort of stuff. And sometimes our sales team will be like, listen to what this person said in this 15-second clip. How that connects to LinkedIn content is a project that I'm actually getting started here in the next few weeks. Is saying, okay, we get these, and it's maybe just kind of a grainy Zoom call recording, or maybe it's kind of out of context. Let's create a process to turn that into content. So we're going to be starting to use, I think, a tool called Video Ask, which is they were purchased by Typeform, which is right a form based software. Video Ask allows you to allow respondents, you can give them a question, but then they can respond by recording a video. So we take that call recording to surface those customer insights, whether that's a praise or how they're talking about the problem or whatever. There's so many different applications. Turn around and go to that client and say, hey, here's a form. It's got an engaging video. We'd love to share, your story a little bit more. Would you mind recording this? And then you bake in the consent, and now you optimize that for social with subtitles and your branded outro and that sort of stuff, and that can become kind of social proof content. So not only are you flowing the insights further into the organization, you're turning that into social content to then reach back out to the market. So I would recommend call recording and look at a tool like Video Ask that might be able to help you turn some of that into content. The other thing, especially for service-based businesses, is an AI tool called Cast Magic. I know some consulting firms are using this to take their call recordings, even if they're just doing it natively in Zoom, and dropping that into Cast Magic, a tool initially built for content repurposing for podcasting. And it will allow you to say, hey, take this transcription or take this audio file or video file, transcribe it, and then give me these different outputs, a tweet thread, a newsletter, a LinkedIn post, without having to go to Chat GPT and say, take this transcript and then do this, and then prompt it over and over again. So those are some things there. And then I can talk about the other thing that we've been doing, but you might have some thoughts there because I got rambling.
No, I love that. I think that those, I don't know. I was just curious about sort of like a large software organization, and I think that that's super helpful just to kind of hear sort of like peek behind the curtain of how you guys are doing it. But then obviously, like to the audience and to our team, like specifically, like seeing it how that those actions could be applied to a service based business is just super helpful. So no, I appreciate that.
And I think the second thing was, we had our everybody has a sales kickoff in SaaS, right? We had a instead of an SKO this year, we had a GKO. So our whole GTM team, so marketing, customer success, sales, everybody together. And I hosted a roundtable where we just reached out to three of our customers that we knew we had a good relationship with. They fit our ICP. We planned a roundtable discussion with like 6, 8 questions. Tell us about what you were evaluating when you decided to move on to teamwork.com. We asked some kind of like case study questions, like what sort of results have you seen? But we also asked them like, what was your buying process like, and where does our platform sit in like stack rank of importance, those sorts of things. And that turned into social content, but also like our chat channel was blowing up internally where people were just like, these are great insights, this and that. Like, I had someone on our demand gen team say, I'm getting ready to write copy for this demand gen campaign. And like this customer interview just wrote it all for me. So that's how we're kind of tightening that feedback loop for ourselves as a software company. As an agency, like host dinners or remote Zoom calls where you do a roundtable with three of your best clients once a quarter or every other quarter, something like that. You can absolutely replicate.
I love that. I think one of the things like so leading leading like the biz dev efforts and being part of the go to market team at Upsource, like I love getting to kind of interact and have agencies interact with our team and be the first person to kind of talk to them and sort of explain them, hey, this is Upsource, this is how we work, this is how we help agencies. But one of the things that doesn't necessarily like it, I haven't really seen, or that's been sort of one of the things that I have it's been hard over the kind of years is like you build a relationship with somebody over the course of a couple weeks, a couple months, and then you hand it off to the service team, and you may not talk to that person for a little while. And I think that you know that you're handing them off to somebody on our team and they'll be in good hands. But last week I got to go to Portland, and I got to go and meet with probably like 4 or 5 clients and sit down in a room and grab dinner with them and sort of continue that relationship. And it had been a little while since I had talked to them, but it was really nice just to kind of see the growth that our team is able to kind of like been able to have with these agencies and sort of just understand sort of where they are, where they're at sort of in their journey and what's been happening with them just as humans, but then also with the business, and just kind of continue to build that relationship and just get to hear from the clients firsthand and be in the same room with them was just really like powerful and just similar to what you were talking about, like of hey, having that feedback loop is super critical, and just that was a huge takeaway from my trip last week and something I really enjoyed. Um, okay, so obviously I know we're coming up on time. One of the last things that I wanted to hit on just with you was just around content based networking. Obviously, this has been a concept that has been around for a little while. But for those of you that may not, for like the audience members that may not be aware of it, would love for you to just kind of like hit on the concept from like a high level of like, hey, this is what this concept is. And then from there, I would love to just kind of talk about like, hey, where do you see the future of this going? And like, what does that look like over the next couple of years?
So, one, I love that you actually named the strategy correctly. A lot of people hear content based networking and they say like content based marketing because they're just used to content marketing rolling off their tongue. But it actually ended up becoming a book from James Carberry, the founder of Sweetfish that I mentioned earlier. And the concept is this: as opposed to just creating content for your ideal audience, create content with members of your ideal audience, because then you create great content, but you also build one-to-one relationships with people who can buy from you. And as I mentioned, this was a big part of what allowed me to do outbound business development in a non-outboundy way when I joined Sweetfish. So the first time that someone who fit our ICP, we were really selling to SaaS companies that were 25 plus employees, that were fast growing, and B2B, right? And we were trying to reach typically the VP of marketing or head of content. And so I would reach out to a VP of marketing, and instead of saying, hey, have you heard of Sweetfish? We could produce a podcast for you and we can turn that into LinkedIn content and kind of pitch them on our services. It was, hey, I'm the host of a podcast called B2B Growth. Would you like to be our guest? And so we would record with them. We'd have a great conversation, just like we're having now. But what people wouldn't hear is I'd stop the recording and they'd say, you know what? We've actually been thinking about launching a podcast ourselves. Who could I talk to at Sweetfish? That seems like that's what you guys do. Who could I talk to about, exploring your services? And I would kind of like sheepishly just like slowly raise up my hand, like, yeah, that's me. And they're like, okay, sweet. And I'd say, something kind of self-deprecating, like, well, if you're not sick of me yet, then, it would be me on the follow-up call. But I would say that kind of tongue in cheek because obviously that wasn't the case because they had a great experience. I added value because we created content that we were going to share with our audience that highlighted them as a subject matter expert. And so it made that transition to a sales conversation so much smoother than just outbound pitch slapping people and stuff like that on LinkedIn or via email. Where I think it's going is that it is harder to get a response from people that you wanna do business with, even when you change the ask. So the pitch you like, don't just do outbound and ask people for a demo or a qualification or discovery meeting if you're a service-based business. Ask them to create content and more people will say yes. More people still say yes, but the answer to that question, like the percentage is going down. The reply rates because it's more often now that people are being invited to speak on a webinar or a podcast today than it was 4, 5, 6 years ago. So one thing I saw a post from, I think it was maybe Sam Dunning at Breaking B2B. I was on his podcast recently, and he was saying that when he does outreach to podcast guests, it is insanely simple and it is very, very personalized. And so that takes more time. But if you think about the fact that you're getting content, you're getting a warm introduction to a prospect that you've decided, hey, they would be a good fit for our agency as a prospective client. Um, and the likelihood of building a relationship there is so much higher. Why wouldn't you take the time to do that more personalized outreach? And it's true even in my case. I run our podcast Agency Life at teamwork.com that we've mentioned a few times here. When I do outreach, it is very rarely like, oh, here's 10, 15, 20, 50 people, and I'm going to load them into a HubSpot sequence. It is oftentimes asking for an introduction to that person, or if I'm already connected with them on LinkedIn, sending a personalized DM or maybe a short personalized email, making it very easy. So I think the strategy of content based networking still really, really works, but people's guards are up more. The barrier to gain their trust, going back to what we were talking about earlier, and that shift in our world today, those things carry through into how you execute this strategy as well. And I think building trust with personalization, keeping things short and tight, asking for intros, those sorts of things are really how you can leverage that same strategy that I started in 2018 that helped me and the team 3x the agency at Sweetfish within a year can still help you today. You just need to make a few tweaks to it.
Nope. I completely agree. And definitely, I think that um, it's the little things where it's like, hey, take the extra 30 seconds, take the extra minute to kind of do the research and figure out how you can kind of personalize things, but make it super concise. So if they're looking at it on a phone, the message isn't too long and it's easy to kind of read. It's all those little things that I think if you can kind of stack those up in a row, you'll see the results. So. All right. Well, obviously, like Logan, thank you so much for the time. I feel like everyone asks this at the end of a podcast, but I do need to ask you, hey, if people are interested in kind of learning more about you or just kind of want to understand, like, where would you direct them or where do you want to send them?
Yeah, two resources. So connect with me on LinkedIn. That's by far and away where I'm most active. I'm pretty easy to find there. My last name is just spelled Lyles. If you connect with me, you'll notice under my profile photo, I've got a link to a free content creation toolkit. A lot of the tools that I use to create content very consistently that accelerate my process and allow me to spend less time creating content, but still see the benefits from it. And if you're an agency owner or professional service firm leader, I host an every other week podcast called Agency Life. You can find that at teamwork.com/agency life or on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time today and for you being here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was fun.